until Wednesday morning when he leaves for Guyana. So, on that note, I want to welcome him again. He was here yesterday evening, and we had hours of sweet nectar. This morning also, he was sharing with us his pastime with Srila Prabhupada, and he's going to be doing that this afternoon, and tomorrow evening also, and Tuesday evening. So on that note, I just want to let you know that you are invited to Monday and Tuesday evenings. So, before I hand over to His Grace, Harisauri Prabhu, I just want to invite all the devotees to please, if you have your cell phones on, kindly switch them off or put them on vibrate. And those of you, we have a whole row of space up here, and I know a lot of devotees will be coming to the evening's program. Okay. So we are going to have the projector here. So those of you at the back, you can come forward, and as the devotees come in, they will have some room. Harisauri Prabhu is going to be showing us some slides. So at least we can put our hands together as we welcome him again to Trinidad and to Sri Lanka. I now hand you over to His Grace Harisauri Prabhu.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 Who was here for this morning or yesterday evening's class?
Yesterday.
Quite a few of you. Okay, so I'm going to continue on from where I left off this morning. Okay, very good. So we're also broadcasting live apparently on 9/4 TV. I live in Maya, of course, so this is my connection. So we were talking on the topic of association. I've been presenting a series of seminars called Srila Prabhupada, the Living Bhagavatam, and looking at different aspects of devotional service and how Srila Prabhupada was practically applying Krishna consciousness in various different kinds of situations and circumstances. So the last two sessions we talked about the importance of associating with a saintly person. Lava Matra, even 1/11th of a second, if you get the chance to associate with a pure devotee, is enough to transform your life and point you in the direction of going back to Godhead. So, as well as knowing how to associate with devotees, we should know how to not associate with devotees as well, and what's the incorrect way of doing that. So, we had a few experiences. This one was quite amusing. We were on a train going from Madras, those days it was called Madras, now Chennai, to Nellore in the north. So we had about a 3-hour train ride. Prabhupada flew down to Madras on the 1st of January 1976. We did 2 nights of programs there, very successful. And then the next day we went to the train station about 8 o'clock in the morning, and we carried with us some fruit and other prasadam for breakfast. After Prabhupada ate, we enjoyed the remnants while he took a little rest, stretching out along the seat, which the devotees had covered with clean white sheets. So they had gotten Prabhupada a first-class cabin on the train. Of course, in India, what is passed off as first class used to be their second or third class, but gradually, as they could not maintain the actual first class, that was discontinued and they just changed the name. So, first class cabin may involve some kind of luxury, cabin, but it wasn't at all. It was just a very basic, simple thing. But the advantage was that it had a door, and if you wanted to, you could shut the door, and then nobody could see in. So we'd done that, and in the cabin there was Srila Prabhupada, there was his new secretary for the month, Tamal Krishna Goswami, there was Harikesh, who was cooking and transcribing Prabhupada's Bhagavatam dictations, and myself as a fairly new addition to the party as Prabhupada's servant. So we had gotten into this cabin, and then we took breakfast. Then afterwards, Tamal Krishna Maharaj went out to wash and swiftly shut the door behind him. When he came back, he sidled through the half-open entry and again quickly shut it. So it looked a bit funny. He was kind of edging out, edging back in, shutting the door as soon as he came in. So, in answer to our quizzical expressions, he said there are 3 men hanging around in the corridor hoping to see Srila Prabhupada. They'll just come in and ask some nonsense and disturb him, so don't let them in. So people in India are often eager to ask for blessings from holy men, but unfortunately they rarely have any serious spiritual intent. There are also many sadhus who are accustomed to offering such meaningless ashirvad or blessings. Prabhupada refers to this kind of sadhu as ashirvad maharajas. Usually they give a wave of the hand, a nod, exchange a few polite words, and there's no spiritual discussion, no transmission of knowledge, and no transformation. Yet both parties are satisfied with this giving and receiving of they know not what, blessings. So, ashirvads. From our understanding of Prabhupada's teachings, such intangible exchanges are of no practical value. And naturally, as Prabhupada's servants, we don't like to see his time wasted with such blessing seekers. So when Harikesh and I went out of the compartment, the curious men were still there. On our return, despite our obvious reluctance to allow them in, they strained to see past us, knowing that if they caught Prabhupada's eye, etiquette would oblige him to let them in. Prabhupada was awake, eye contact was established, and he instructed us to let them in. So the 3 filed in, sitting opposite Srila Prabhupada, smiling, and pleased that they had evaded the secretaries as someone they knew was a great spiritual leader and a holy man. So thus we sat, we 3 somewhat irritated by this polite infringement on Prabhupada's precious time, they 3 ignoring us and eager to have his darshan, and Prabhupada, as always, a warm and cordial host. Not at all inconvenienced, Prabhupada received them courteously, and he asked them a few polite questions. What were their names? Where had they come from? What do they do? And this and the like. Then he looked directly into their faces and he said, "So, what is it that I can do for you?" "Well, Swamiji, we just wanted to get your blessings." "What is that blessing?" Prabhupada asked. This answer took them by surprise. Nobody had ever asked them what kind of blessings. Caught off guard, one of them replied, "Well, Swamiji, I have this pain in my knee." So we almost groaned out loud, and the man, becoming embarrassed, hastily added, "Well, then also for our families as well." So again we groaned. And of course we want to do good for others. So he trailed off into confused silence. Prabhupada indicated his 3 disciples with their shaved heads, sikas, kurtas, dhotis, and tulsi beads. He told his visitors, "This is my blessing. These boys have given up everything for Krishna's service and to chant Hare Krishna. Are you prepared to accept such a blessing?" At first there was no reply. They were stunned. All kinds of wild thoughts seemed to run through their heads and across their faces. Then, before they could become the beneficiaries of this blessing, they hurriedly stood. Well, actually, Swamiji, at the moment we have so many duties with the family and all, and this kind of life for a sannyasi, that for us this is not possible. So with profuse apologies and many thanks, they beat a hasty retreat. We laughed as Prabhupada sat smiling and shook his head. He said, "This is the problem. They simply take a sadhu as a means for avoiding paying the doctor's bills." Ashirvad Maharaj, they are not serious for spiritual life. So people have no appreciation of a real Mahatma. So Prabhupada did that sometimes, depending on, of course, what spiritual point that he wanted to make. But this was a typical thing that people kind of foolishly, in one sense, without real knowledge, they approach sadhus and they want this blessing and that blessing, they want some material benefit. But that was not what Prabhupada was about. He wasn't interested in giving people just some temporary material relief of, their material existence. Rather, he wanted to give people genuine knowledge and actually transform their lives. And therefore, he was very proud of his Western disciples that they had given up, relatively opulent lives compared to people in general in India, and taken up this path of renouncing materialism and devoting themselves wholeheartedly to worshipping Krishna. That was Prabhupada's success. So to see him have his time wasted by this kind of ashirvad or blessing seeking, we didn't really want to see that. So at least these men had a chance. They could have accepted the benediction of the blessing that Prabhupada was going to give them, which was to transform them into full-time devotees. But they weren't ready for that. So that was Prabhupada's policy. People should take advantage of associating with devotees. So on May 16th, 1976, we were traveling. We had come to Hawaii at the beginning of the month. Prabhupada spent 1 month in Hawaii. He went there particularly because he wanted to write. And the previous year, Prabhupada had gone to Los Angeles. His Bhaktivedanta Book Trust had just been transplanted from New York into the Los Angeles community. And when Prabhupada got there, he was not very happy to see that the devotees had fallen way behind his translating. There was about 17 books that were still in production with no plan to get them all out. So Prabhupada was a bit perturbed by that. He wanted the devotees to publish at the same speed that he was writing. So he ordered that now that I'm here for 2 months, so you get all 17 books out within this next 2 months, which at that time they thought was impossible, to which Prabhupada replied, "Impossible is a word in a fool's dictionary." So the devotees set about correcting the problem, and by the end of the 2 months they had in fact published 16 or 17 volumes. It was a little short of a miracle. Because in those days, of course, there were no personal computers or anything. Much of the work that was done was manual. Plus, most of the work that they were doing was on the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and every volume had to have so many paintings in them as well. There was Bengali, there was Sanskrit editing, there was a lot of work on them. So for them to get out 16 or 17 volumes in 2 months was miraculous. But Prabhupada, of course, was very pleased with that. So in April of '76, a few months later, Rameshwara was the GBC, and he was the trustee of the BBT for North America. He came to see Prabhupada in Vrindavan, and they were planning Prabhupada's route for his next world tour. So it was decided he would go down to Australia, then New Zealand, then Fiji, and then he would come to Hawaii by the 1st of May, 1st or 2nd of May, and then he would spend 1 month there with the intention that he would be able to increase his writing. So of course when you're traveling, practically speaking, it's impossible to do any decent sort of writing. Prabhupada was one of the very few personalities that I ever met that was actually able to, engage in all kinds of managerial work, travel and preach like anything, and then at the same time regularly do some serious writing. So Prabhupada was doing something every night, but when we came to Hawaii, because there was no disturbance, we're in the middle of the Pacific Ocean there, no visitors, like in India we would get hundreds of visitors coming every afternoon, but in Hawaii nobody was there except just a few devotees. So it was an ideal situation for Prabhupada to write, and he took full advantage of it. Immediately we arrived, he changed gears, and he started producing about 6 or 7 times the amount that he normally did on any one given night. And in fact, he started translating in the daytime as well. And then on top of that, one of his early disciples, Hayagriva Prabhu, who was an English professor, of course he was one of the original crew that joined in 1966 at 26 2nd Avenue. So he came about halfway through the month, and every day for about 2 or 3 hours, Prabhupada was meeting with him, and they were discussing what was then known as the philosophy book. So it was meant to be a critique from the Vedic standpoint of the various philosophies from Greece, from Europe, etc. So Prabhupada was working very hard on that, and then at the same time he was doing a tremendous amount of work on writing his Bhagavatam commentaries. And in fact, 1 or 2 nights in Hawaii, Prabhupada didn't even take rest. Normally I would go into his room about 9:30, he would have a hot glass of milk, then he would take rest for an hour or an hour and a half, I'd give him a massage, and then about 11:30 he would get up, and then he would commence his writing and write throughout the night. But on a couple of occasions, Prabhupada rang the bell. I went in, it was 9 o'clock, it was a little early, and I was surprised to see Prabhupada was sitting there already working on translating his books, and he called me in just to tell me no massage, no rest. And I think he was just finishing the 7th canto. If you read the 7th canto, the last verse, then there's a little paragraph or 2 paragraphs afterwards where Prabhupada says that we finished this. I think it was in the Codicy, as it is today. We finished translating the 7th canto by the mercy of the Panchatattva, because in Honolulu there were the deities, Panchatattva deities. So Prabhupada worked throughout the entire night, didn't take any rest at all, and he did that several times whilst we were there in Hawaii. At the same time, every morning he was going for his walk. We used to go down to a place called Magic Island, which was a little promontory at the seafront. Prabhupada would stand and, we would walk around, and then on one side there was a place where there were lots of waves. So Prabhupada would stand and watch what he called the sufferers, the surfers. So they call it surfing, I call it suffering. And then he would come back up to the temple and give class. So this time he was talking from the 6th canto, 1st chapter, the story of Ajamil. And in there, then on this particular day, Prabhupada mentioned about the importance of associating with devotees. So this was May 16, 1976. In answer to Pariksit Maharaj's doubts about the efficacy of atonement, Sukadeva Goswami gave his final conclusion in verse 16. My dear King, if a sinful person engages in the service of a bona fide devotee of the Lord, and thus learns how to dedicate his life unto the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, then he can become completely purified. One cannot be purified merely by undergoing austerity, penance, brahmacharya, and the other methods of atonement that I have previously described. So Prabhupada emphasized the importance of the role of the Guru and the need for good association. He gave the example of Dhruva Maharaj, who, although he was only 5 years old and had no knowledge of God, was nevertheless very determined to see him. And because of this, he was shown great mercy. Prabhupada told us, Krishna saw, this boy is very determined, and therefore he sent his representative, Narada. Go and train him. He is very eager. Therefore Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says that you can enter into spiritual service by double mercy. One mercy is Krishna. The other mercy is the spiritual master. One cannot be Krishnapita Prana, or one cannot dedicate his life to Krishna unless he has got the mercy of the spiritual master. Therefore Narottam Das Thakur has said in many of his songs, Charya Vaishnava Seva Nistara Payechi Keva. Without serving a Vaishnava, who has gotten liberation? Our ambition should be how to serve Krishna through the disciplic succession, the Guru, and live in the association of devotees. This is the process. So we are opening so many centers all over the world, and this is our policy, that people may take advantage of associating with devotees and the chance of serving the Vaishnavas. Then it will be successful. So that was Prabhupada's program. I was reading the other day one of his letters, and in there he mentions that the purpose of preaching is to bring a person to the point of commitment. Yeah, we go out, we chant Hare Krishna, we distribute prasadam, we have festivals, etc. But there's a point to all of that. It's not that we're just doing it casually. Or even though people get the benefit of hearing the holy names and taking prasadam, still there's a purpose to preaching beyond just giving people that initial contact. Prabhupada's intention was to bring people to the point of commitment. That means when you actually surrender to Krishna, at least formally, and initiation. Yeah, when you get initiation, you make a commitment to live a life as a devotee. So that was Prabhupada's intention in creating all these temples. They're centers where people can come, and as we heard the other day, even just by imitating the devotees, people may come and they say, oh, the devotees are bowing down before the deity. Oh, it's the etiquette. Let me also bow down as well. So they do it without knowing. But that's called Agyata Sukriti. It means unknowingly they're getting Sukriti. Sukriti is the means by which one can approach the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So when we build up our level of Sukriti, or piety if you like, that then gradually brings us to the point where we can actually understand the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, and where we can take the process of becoming a devotee very seriously. Our whole purpose in this human form of life is to go back home, back to Godhead. We're not here to have a comfortable life in the material world. That's an illusion. Some people, they think that they practice religion so that they can get some material benefits. Give me a nice wife, give me a nice car, give me some food to eat, make me successful in my business. So many things people think, the benefits of worshipping God, because it's kind of pious that at least they believe there is a God. But to go to the Supreme Lord and ask Him, for some material items, that is like going to a rich man and trying to and asking him for something which is commonly available in the marketplace. Yeah, if somebody's there that can give you so much, say, $1 million, and you go and ask for $10, then where is the sense in that? So the same way, if we approach Krishna, if we approach the Supreme Lord, and then we ask, give me this, give me that, give me some material benefit or so-called benediction, or I have a pain in my knee. That's not the process. Yeah? That's foolishness. One should actually understand this human form of life is unique. It comes after many, many births in this material world. It's our opportunity now to finish the whole business of material life, which means eating, sleeping, mating and defending, birth, death, disease and old age. You can summarize it that way. That whatever happens, whether you become a Bill Gates or a Warren Buffett, they're the richest men in the world, but actually just by accumulating material wealth, that doesn't make you happy. Everybody has a certain capacity. And beyond that, if you get facility for more than your own capacity, what use is it? It's just like if you're earning, $1,000 a week. So you eat 3 meals a day, yeah, you have a certain level of living. But even if you earn $1 million a week, you can't eat more than your 3 meals. Right? You're still, your capacity doesn't increase even if the facility to enjoy does. So there's a certain point that you don't need anything extra. You get, at least in the Ishopanishad, it says everybody should get what they need. Yeah, we need to eat and sleep, we need somewhere to live, we need some kind of means of livelihood. But beyond that, then whatever we do with our time, that is very precious in this human form. We get 70 or 80 years, and if we fail to take real advantage of it, then at the end of that time, then everything is lost. We die, we leave these bodies, then we have to take another birth somewhere else, and we don't even know if that's going to be human or not. It's a risk. And especially in this age of Kali, things have become so degraded so fast, so it's very easy to get caught up in a very materialistic and negative frame of living. So in Krishna consciousness, we try to encourage everybody to take advantage of this human form to the maximum degree by engaging in Krishna's service, devotional service. That's transcendental, and the benefits from that are never lost. All the material benefits that we get, they'll all be finished at the time of leaving this body. Bill Gates will be in the same position as a beggar in the streets of Calcutta. Yeah, no difference. Yeah, he cannot say, oh, I've got $80 billion. Yamaraj, I'll give you a portion of this, you just leave me alone. And Yamaraj is not interested. Yeah. So we should remember that the most precious thing that we have is time. Yeah. The most precious thing that we have is time. And how we utilize that time will decide what our future will bring. Yeah, we create our own future. If we want an auspicious future, that time should be utilized for associating with devotees. In that way, then we have a chance at the end of this life, instead of thinking of something material and lamenting, I'm leaving this, I'm leaving my family, I'm leaving my job, I'm leaving so many things, we can look forward to leaving this body and hoping to enter into the transcendental pastimes of the Supreme Lord. So that's our purpose. This is our Krishna consciousness movement. It's to give people this chance to utilize their time properly, most valuably, by associating with the devotees. We can go on. We will go on, but tomorrow. Now I'm going to stop this portion of the presentation. It will just take us 1 minute to set up with the slideshow, and then we'll show you something on the Bhaktivedanta Research Center, which is a project that we've started in Calcutta for preserving ancient manuscripts and all the important works of our previous acharyas. So if you just give us 1 moment to set up. Does anybody have any quick questions before we commence with the slideshow? Anybody that's not within clear range or viewing range of the screen, you can move now, yeah, so that you can see the screen.
the project that you're going to show, you are in charge of this, is it?
Yes, it's something that I started with the devotee called Pramila. He's from Sweden. He was doing his PhD studies on Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. As you'll see on the slideshow, he successfully completed his thesis on the life and times and teachings of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. He had a plan for developing a Vaishnava Studies Center. I was also working at that time on establishing a library, Vedic Cosmology library for our project in Calcutta. So we combined the two programs together, and we began this research center in 2009, just exactly 5 years ago. Okay, where is your, we'll take that over. Yes. I'm not going to block your view here. Sometimes if you take the lead, unplug it and plug it back in again. Anyway. I don't know. Okay, so this is the Bhaktisiddhanta Research Center in Calcutta. Is there anybody here that's familiar with Calcutta? No Bengalis? We're in South Calcutta, and as you can see, it says a complete Vaishnava literary resource and Vedic cosmology library. In 1976, I was with Prabhupada. We just arrived back from his last world tour, and the Juhu Beach Temple in Bombay was just coming up very rapidly. So Prabhupada called in Giriraj, who was the temple president at that time, and told him that we should have a first-class library so that scholars could come and seriously study Vaishnava philosophy and become convinced and become devotees. So he said the library should have all his own books. Those are the Acharyas, which includes Ramanuja, Madhvacharya, etc., as well as the Upanishads and other bona fide texts. Somehow or another this wasn't fulfilled, and so when we started this project, I thought this would be a good opportunity to fulfill Prabhupada's desire about the new library. So this is our building. This is actually 5 stories. You can see the research centre there and ISKCON on the top. That was donated in 2000. This is Pranava Prabhu. He's my co-director and co-founder. He's our academic director. He speaks 7 languages fluently, and I think he has a working knowledge of 10. He got his PhD on Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. This is his thesis that was published by Oxford University Press, The History, Life and Thought of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. It's a very important book, and he is currently a professor at Stockholm University in Sweden, and at the same time we work very closely together for developing this project. We opened on June 30th, 2009. Jagtak Maharaj and Bhakti True Maharaj were our guests of honour. This is Mr. Shyam Sukha. He's the donor of the building. He also lives in it. This is what we began with, which is basically 1,000 square foot of hall. We had to gut it, all the electrics, all the woodwork, all the windows, etc. After 6 months of hard work, we had a nice library. So this library is fully air conditioned. It can house about 15,000 or 16,000 books, and it's fully computerized. So this year we added some partitions for students, a rare book section, some display cabinets, etc. And we also got this moving rack, which is an archive facility. You can see the cabinets split apart on these rails. Prabhu, can you just sit one time? I'm hitting you in the back of the head with the laser. You can see the rails there, and they slide up and down. You can close them on. So these cost normally about $20,000. We were lucky we got this locally in Calcutta for $2,000. So we began with 4,000 titles. Current catalogue we got 15,000. Plus we've got a digital manuscript library of about 1,000. The core of the collection was the personal collection of Sundarananda Vijayvinod. This is him. This is Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. He was a Sanskrit professor from Dhaka. He joined up with the Gaudiya Mission. He was one of their main chief literary figures, and he was the custodian of the original library of the Bagbazar temple, which was, virtually speaking, the personal library of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. After his disappearance, then there was some problems, some fighting was going on, so Sundarananda removed the entire library, the Gaudiya Mat library, to his home. And it stayed there for 70 years until it came to us. As it turns out, it was an extremely important collection. We got it via His Holiness Bodhian Swami. He's the Acharya of the Gopinath Gaudiya Mat. It's a long story, but basically the books were supposed to come to us and we were going to buy them. Then at the last minute the family gave everything to Bodhian Maharaj. We contacted him, and then he very amazingly gave the entire collection over to us for protection in the library. So it was a very wonderful gesture. So we'll have a look at a few of the rare works that are there. This is an original print of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Life and Precepts from 1896. This, of course, is the book that Bhaktivinoda Thakur sent all across the world to major universities. So this is an original print of that. This is an original photo of Jagannath Das Babaji. In fact, it's the only photo known of Jagannath Das Babaji. He was about 120 years old when this was taken. Very, very valuable. One of the important sections of Sundarananda's collection was this Nadia, Prakash, Gaudiya, Sanjantoshini, Harmonist and Bhagwat collection. These are all the periodicals that were being produced in the Gaudiya Mat. The Nadia Prakash was a daily, the Gaudiya was a weekly, the Sanjantoshini was a monthly, the Harmonist was the English version of that, and the Bhagwat was the Hindi. So, as good publishers, they collected or kept a copy of every single edition, so there were multiple volumes of these periodicals. And the reason why they're important is because they didn't just give philosophical articles in these periodicals, but there were lots of news items as well. And if you were to read through them all, you get a very clear understanding of the development of the preaching of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So here's multi-volumes of The Harmonist from 1927 all the way through to 1937. This is the Nadi Prakash, the daily newspaper. It was an interesting format because it was 4 pages, newspaper size. 2 pages were mundane news, and 2 pages were spiritual news. So they would go out and sell these as a newspaper. Now anybody that bought them, they would get information about the spiritual world as well as the material world. So it was a very clever device that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati came up with. Then here's the Bhagavad, that was a Hindi journal, that's from 1931. But apart from the periodicals, we found this rather interesting book. It had 3 sections in it. The back section was just blank pages with newspaper clippings stuck in them. And it says there, thoughts on popular topics or occasional notes by Babu Kedarnath Dutt, Deputy Collector and Magistrate, that is Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And these were all from 1871. So he was writing original poetry and articles and having them published in the local newspaper. And so somebody clipped them all out and stuck them in this book. So here you see the famous verse, "He reasons ill who tell the Vaishnavas die when thou art living still in sound. The Vaishnavas die to live, and living try to spread a holy life around." We normally print this as the holy name, but actually this is the first known printing of this poem. It says holy life. So all of the articles were signed as Sharigrahi Vaishnava, and this one's dated Puri, 29th of August, 1871. This is another poem. It says original poetry, reflections. Alas for those that spend their days in festive mirth and joy, the dazzling deadly liquid forms their hearts for air employ. This is the famous song about the drinkers, the drunkards, and how they can be saved by taking on Krishna consciousness. Now this is the handwriting of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. This is a stanza that he wrote to introduce an 8-page hand-calculated horoscope of his son Lalit Prasad. Bhaktivinoda studied astrology when he was 12 years old. So you can see here all the astrological periods of his son's life all written down. This is a letter that Bhaktivinoda sent to his home in 1871. This is his signature there on the bottom in Bengali script. And this is a piece of the manuscript, again Bhaktivinoda Thakur's actual handwriting. Is this necessary? With the flashing camera. Alright, please don't do that, it's very distracting. Now one of the important things that we found is this. This is the complete prayers from the Sharanagati series written by Bhaktivinoda Thakur. This is his handwritten version of this, so you could say this is kind of like our first modern day Vaishnava songbook. So this is about 200 pages. Bhaktivinoda Thakur writing all his devotional ecstasies down for us to share. This is his commentary on the Bhagavad Gita. Many of these books, you can see the condition that we're in. We got to these just in time. Another few years they would have been finished. And some of these books were only ever printed one time and have never been put into print since. This is the Padma Purana. Again, it was long out of print, maybe 80 to 90 years ago. 2 volumes in Sanskrit. He collected together 6 or 7 commentaries by different acharyas and put them in with the original verses. Last year we found this folder. It's got about 50 pages of the handwriting of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. He was writing draft articles to be published in the Gaudiya, and Sundarananda was the editor of the Gaudiya, so he received these letters and he kept them carefully in this folder. So here you see it says the Gaudiya Printing Works. That was the in-house printing press the Gaudiya Mat had. When they got this new temple in Bag Bazaar, which was in North Calcutta, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he had the printing press installed in the temple in front of the deities, because he wanted the deities to have the pleasure of seeing all the literature going out. So that's his signature there. We'll have a closer look at that. It says Nitya Ashravadika Siddhanta Saraswati. We were just talking about Ashravads. So Nitya Ashravadika means I am giving you my well wishes eternally. In other words, as Prabhupada translated it, your ever well wisher. So Prabhupada's signature there, your ever well wisher, is actually a direct translation of his spiritual master's signature. This is a list of office holders. They had intended to start a Vaishnava Studies Institute right next to the birthplace of Lord Chaitanya. It was called Thakur Bhaktivinoda Research Institute. Any of his disciples with any kind of literary qualification were listed here, ready to take up posts in this Vaishnava Theological College. Unfortunately, again, when things broke down, the college was not established, the government took over the buildings, and now it's a mundane school. But we have a plan to revive this. This is the first printed biography of Saraswati, called Saraswati Jayashree of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. This was published in 1934. It was not published again until 2008. It's in Bengali, of course. And there was supposed to be about 5 in the series, but only this one came out. However, we found 2 copies of what was going to be Volume 2, but it was never published. Here you can see the natal chart of Bhaktisiddhanta on the front. So we're now translating this. It's Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati recalling growing up in the house of Bhaktivinoda Thakur up to the age of 18 years. So it's virtually an autobiography. So this is a revelation for the Vaishnava community. We found this one sheet of paper. It says, the last wishes of His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada, 31st of December 1936 at 10:30 a.m. This is the last will of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, spoken about 16 hours before he left the planet. It was written in English and it was witnessed by about 4 disciples. It's especially important for us because the second item says, form a governing body of 10 to 12 persons for management of the mission's work. Prabhupada told us many times because they failed to do that, the whole Gaudiya mission fell apart and the unity was lost. So this is the actual will of Bhaktisiddhanta. Before he started his preaching work, he was publishing Jyotirvid, which was an astronomical periodical. This is very important for us. We found a whole year's worth for the Temple of the Vedic Planetarium in Mayapur. It will give us some insights as to how he was viewing the universe. This is the Vaishnava calendar from 1928. This is the first book that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati wrote, which was not astronomical or astrological. This is from 1899. You can see there the damage by bugs. Fortunately, the contents are still intact. Bangay Samagikata means the social life of Bengal. This is a survey of India, map of Nadia from 1917, which was the year that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati took sannyas. And in there you can see this is the Ganges, this is the Jalangi, this is modern day Namadweep. Here you have Mahesh Ganj, which is where Bhaktivinoda Thakur was living, and the Yog Pit is over here. So he could see straight across from his village there to the birthplace of Lord Chaitanya, and our ISKCON community is now right in the middle, in the line of sight, and our new temple is directly in sight from Bhaktivinoda Thakur to the Yog Pit. But you can see here at this time there's not a single building practically. It was just wasteland. So that's a few things from Sundarananda's collection. Now the other part of the catalogue that we have, this is Achyuta Prabhu. He's Italian. He lives in Calcutta. His wife is Bengali. He's a book collector. Any spare money he's got, any spare time, he goes out and finds old books. Calcutta is full of second-hand bookstores. And he's amassed over 11,000 volumes in the last 25 years. He has no idea what they are, most of them. The last 2 or 3 years he's been having somebody work on a catalogue for this. Once we get that, we're going to negotiate with him to buy the whole collection for the library. In the meantime, they're on the shelves. He's got sections on Vedic science and mathematics, Jagannath Puri, Kirtan, Vedanta Sutra, Bhagavad Gita, etc. A few important things he's got there. This is Sri Krishna Chaitanya, which was an English exposition of the life and teachings of Lord Chaitanya by Nishikant Sanyal. He was commissioned by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati to write this. The devotees that went to London in 1933 were not allowed to leave until this book had been published, because it's all in English. So as soon as it came out in 1933, then he sent them to England. This is a little memorial booklet for Thakur Bhaktivinoda. This year is 2014. He left the planet in 1914, so this is his 100th anniversary, coming up, I think, in about 2 or 3 days. Those of you that are on the internet, on the disappearance day of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, if you go onto Wikipedia, you type in Bhaktivinoda Thakur, you'll see the devotees have actually got a whole entry in Wikipedia on Thakur Bhaktivinoda Thakur to celebrate his centenary disappearance. This is a book by Calcutta University on the Vaishnava literature of medieval Bengal. That's 100 years old. We also have here Kavikarnapura, a famous Vaishnava poet. This is from 1885. This is a very interesting item. This is the Bhagavad Gita. This is the first known English printed version of the Bhagavad Gita. Charles Wilkins was one of the first scholars to discover Vedic literature. So in 1785, he published this Bhagavad Gita, Dialogues of Krishna and Arjuna. Yeah? And then this book made its way to the West. Emerson, Thoreau, and all the American transcendentalists, this is the version of the Gita that they were reading. So Tutor found this print. It's a third print. This one came out in 1845. So long, 150, 165, 170 years ago. Very important. This one is the collected works of William Jones, 1799. William Jones was fluent in 14 languages. He could speak 26 others. He was the scholar that said that Sanskrit is the mother language of all other languages in the world. And he did many extensive translations of the Veda. He died in 1795. This particular volume came out in 1799. He was also the co-founder of the Asiatic Society in Calcutta. That's a few things from Achyuta's collection. Coming nearer to home, last year this is Janali Vas, our head Pujari from Mayapur. This is Prabhupada's Almira in his bedroom. In there we found 20 postcards addressed to Srila Prabhupada from 1949 and 1950. They're addressed to Abhay Charanaravindo Bhaktivedanta. So even at that time, Prabhupada was using the title Bhaktivedanta. This is 1950. This is a really nice letter from the Governor of Bihar's office, 1950. His Excellency the Governor will be glad to see you, but he will have no talk with you about the publication of your books, and he cannot give you any help in that respect. Also, it will not be possible for His Excellency to approach any publishers, nor can he give you any financial assistance. In these circumstances, it is not worthwhile for you to incur the expenditure of coming to Patna, but if you're still desirous of seeing His Excellency, please let me know, so a date and time can be fixed for your interview. You are also advised not to send the manuscripts to His Excellency. So, this is like the ultimate rejection letter. Anybody here that distributes books? Have we got any book distributors in the audience? One or two. So if you're having a down day and nobody's taking any books, you keep a copy of this in your pocket. You can read it. It will inspire you, because even though it's saying you won't get any help, no connection with publishers, no finances, don't even show your books. Prabhupada writes back, he says, I have no intention of talking about my books. I'm coming on a cultural and peace mission. And then he gets the interview, and then he puts this little news item out. Abhay Chandra Arvindo Bhaktivedanta, the editor of Back to Godhead Calcutta, is in Patna to meet with the governor on a cultural peace mission. So even though it's been completely rejected and told, you may as well not even spend the money for coming here, Prabhupada still has got one slither, one little, chink, where they could slip through there and do some preaching. We found this original Back to Godhead from 1958, the famous Truth and Beauty issue. A couple of the Hindi version, Bhagavad Darshan from 57 and 58. And this is the power of attorney that Prabhupada signed to enable Tamal Krishna Goswami to go to Mayapur in April of 1971 and purchase the first piece of land of our ISKCON property. So this is a historical document. You can see Prabhupada's signature on the bottom there. So other things that we have in the library, some of you will know Sadhaputta Prabhu, genius. He was the head of our scientific community. This picture was taken in Washington in 1976. Swarup Damodar, Sadhaputta, Rupanuga, and Madhava. They were the founding members of the Bhaktivedanta Institute. Unfortunately, Sadhaputta left us in 2008, but at least he left a legacy. One of the most important things he did was study the 5th canto of the Bhagavatam for about 8 or 9 years, and he came out with Vedic cosmography and astronomy. And for the first time we were able to actually feel convinced that we could present the 5th canto in the Mayapur temple as Prabhupada desired. So this was a groundbreaking work. We were fortunate, his widow, Devanrita Mataji, gave us his entire personal library. So there's a lot of reference materials, but there's a lot of original stuff there as well. And we've started putting that into different categories in the library there. Nishringananda Prabhu from ITV saw this presentation 2 years ago in Udupi in South India. He got fired up, so he sent us his entire collection of Back to Godheads. There's a lot more volumes than that, but that's a few. So that's a few of the things we have in the library. About 50% of Bhaktivinoda and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's works are still not translated into English, so we've started a translation department this last year. We'll have 2 imprints, one for academics and one for the general public. The academic line, the first volume that will come out will be this, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's personal diary. Nobody knew that this existed. Sundarananda made one copy of it, we don't know where the original is, and kept it in his library, and people just forgot about it. But it runs from 1904 to 1936. So this has been translated, it's been annotated and edited, and we hope to get this out early next year now. It's a very, very important work. Apart from the books, we have a manuscript mission. We've been visiting Bengal, Orissa, Vrindavan, Jaipur, Bangladesh, etc. This is the head of the National Mission for Manuscripts for the Indian government, Professor Tripathi, and we've applied for status as a manuscript resource centre. If we get that, then we'll get some funding from the government. This is what we're looking for. These are tree bark. This one is a palm leaf, and this one is handmade paper. This palm leaf one was one of about 20 that were found floating in the Ganges. People nowadays have no, use for them. They clutter up their houses, and so they toss them out or burn them. So this is India's literary heritage. And so we thought we'd do something to try to rectify that a little bit. These are a few items that have been given to us. This is a Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya from about 250 years ago. This gentleman is Sudin Goswami from the Gaurangatal Mandir in Navadvip. That box there next to the Lord on the altar has this manuscript inside it. That manuscript is the 10th canto by Gadadhar Pandit. And they say with some comments by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So they allowed us to photograph the whole thing. There's about 493 palm leaves there. And here you see the inner handwriting is one style, the top line and the bottom line and the end is another. That top line and bottom line is said to be Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's commentary or annotation to the original work. We went to Bangladesh last year. Many of our acharyas came from that area of Bengal because it didn't become Bangladesh. In 1940, it was originally all Bengal. Then in 1947 it was partitioned off and became East Pakistan. In 1971 they broke away from West Pakistan and became Bangladesh. So when a minority, as the Hindus are in this area, are persecuted, as they have been, the tendency is to get your treasures and send them out of the country or hide them. So I figured that, apart from money and jewellery, manuscripts would be one of the treasures, but you wouldn't be able to transport those very easily. And so there must be many places in Bangladesh where the Hindus have got lots of literature, but they're just not, showing it. And if we look around, we'll find something. So our team went to Sylhet. Does anybody know the importance of Sylhet in Chaitanya Leela? I'm not sure about a way to chariot, but Jagannath Mishra came from there. Lord Chaitanya's father. This is where he comes from. Anyway, they went there, they found this private library, Ishwar Patsal, and there was 9,000 manuscripts there. And the people that look after it are old. They don't appeal to the government for help because they're afraid they'll destroy it. And they have no catalogue or list. They've just got all these thousands of manuscripts just heaped up there, rotting away. And this is not by any means a rare occurrence. So they've asked us to come there and do the cataloguing. And you never know, there may be some rare works by some Vaishnava Goswamis that have somehow or another been lost over the period of time. So that's there in Bangladesh. In Orissa, the same situation, another private library, nobody looking after it hardly, and they've got 17,000 manuscripts. So there's a huge wealth of literature out there. This is an Navadvip town library, used to be the Edward VII Anglo-Sanskrit library, and scholars used to go there because they had an extensive manuscript library. Nowadays nobody goes there, and so the manuscripts have been neglected. They're just heaped up in these cupboards, about 2,500. This is what happens when you don't look after things. And so they also have invited us to come and do the cataloguing, and they're willing to part with some of the manuscripts that might be valuable for us. Apart from these libraries, this is a private collection that he came across this year. The Suramitra family, they're very aristocratic. They have their own family tree there, printed out in a big thick book. They came to Calcutta from Ayodhya about 250 years ago. This is Raja Pitambara Mitra. He was the one who brought the family from Ayodhya to Mathura and then from Mathura to Calcutta. One of his descendants is Rajendra Lal Mitra. He was the first Indian president of the Asiatic Society, and he was their librarian for about 30 years. So this family know the value of literature. So the modern day representative of the family is Swarup Mitra. He contacted us. He had heard about the work that we were doing. This is Pranava Prabhu. This is Krishna Chaitra Prabhu. And he invited us to come and see his place. This is their joint family home from over 200 years ago. Very big place. And they have a temple, and their deities are Rivati Balaram. These deities were actually worshipped more than 250 years ago in Ayodhya. There's apparently some district there where everybody worships Rivati Balaram. So they're still very well looked after. And the family then, they have a huge number of very important Vaishnava literatures, manuscripts, but they don't know what to do with them. So when he saw the work that we were doing, he invited us to come. We cleaned them up, and we photographed about 80 manuscripts so far, and there's another small library nearby that they're going to give us access to. Another collection that I got just recently, about a month before I left Mayapur, was some manuscripts that were sent to me, sent to the library from Vrindavan, from the Mishra family. This is a picture of the Panchatattva from over 200 years ago. There's some very interesting manuscripts. It all came in one box. This is the Adikanda of the Chaitanya Charitamrita from 250 years ago. And this is the complete Chaitanya Charitamrita. This is all handwritten, this is not printed. It's all handwritten. This is from 1760. So very, very valuable documents. Last year we had a major breakthrough at Vijayanagar, the birthplace of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. As I mentioned, it's his 100th anniversary of disappearance. Their original family property was called Dasa Mandir, 12 temples. There was a Durga temple here, now it's a Radhamadhava temple. There were 10 small Shiva temples with these large Shiva lingams in them. All the lingams now have been sent to Shantipur except for one. And there was a Kali temple, which is just undergoing renovation this year. So 12 temples. And apart from that, on the 5 acres of land they have, there is the actual birth site of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, that small temple there. It was pointed out by Bhaktivinoda himself. That's his picture inside the Samadhi. So Prabhupada was there in 72. He wanted to lease some land, and he negotiated with Lalit Prasad Thakur, the younger brother of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. You can see Guru Das and Shyama Sundar there. He was favourable, but he was 92 at that time. His management committee, were not so favourable. Prabhupada went back again in 76. I was with him on that particular visit, and the same thing. So, at least in 72, Prabhupada wrote the day after that photo was taken saying, now you can expedite the lease agreement immediately, and I can advise my assistants to take the work and begin construction. It never happened, but one thing that the devotees did find was a collection of original manuscripts. That was informed to Srila Prabhupada. As soon as he heard about it, he wrote to Yadavara, who was a professional photographer, and told him to go to Vijayanagar and photograph all the manuscripts page by page very completely before it's too late. They should be preserved for future generations of Vaishnavas to see the actual handwriting and words of such great saintly persons. Treat this matter very seriously and thoroughly. and take all precautions to protect this wonderful boon of literature forever. These items are very, very priceless, a great treasure house of Vaishnava law. Take all precautions to guard them. This is a very, very important work. So Yadavara, in fact, did go there. He spent 1 week in 1972. This is a sample from a handwritten manuscript by Bhaktivinoda Thakur. But they didn't really show him the full collection, just a few things. After 1 week he left and he was not able to go back there. The few photographs that he did take were sent to the archives. We just had those digitized this last year, but the bulk of the works was not there. So last year, on an intuition, I went with some devotees to Vijayanagar. I visited the birth site. This is Dasa Babaji. He's in charge there. It turned out, contrary to what we've been informed, that he was actually very friendly. He took me all around the place, showed all the buildings, and gave a little bit of the history. And then I asked him, I heard that you have some original handwriting of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Is it possible to see it? So he came back 10 minutes later with this book, and it turned out to be a handwritten copy of the Chaitanya Bhagavat by Bhaktivinoda Thakur with some notes in the pages as well. And you can see the condition is splitting and cracking. So I told him, you know, if you wait for another 30, 40 years, there won't be any of this literature left. So he agreed. So I suggested that he come and see us at the library, and we would like to offer the service of preserving this literature. So 2 days later, I sent a taxi. We brought him to the library. He had not seen these pictures. He's a disciple of Lalit Prasad Thakur, but he'd never seen these pictures before. So we showed him the pictures of Prabhupada with his guru. We printed them out on the spot and gave them to him. We showed him the library. We negotiated over 2 months, and then in the beginning of April we met with the members of his committee, and they very happily signed an agreement which allowed us to come and catalogue everything that they have, then bring it to the library and scan it, then preserve it by de-acidifying where we can, and then we would return all the originals back to Vijayanagar. That was the agreement. So in mid-April last year, we took all the literature from Vijayanagar. There was 181 works, manuscripts, books and letters, and we found some real nectar in this as well, connected to ISKCON. One of them was this letter that was sent, handwritten by Srila Prabhupada from Moscow in June 21st. Nobody had ever seen this letter before because it was handwritten in Bengali. So it just never made it to the archives. But they had saved it. And it's very interesting. He says, I'm staying here in room number 356 with 2 American disciples. The preaching will be on Vedic conception of communism, knowledge derived from authoritative tradition, and scientific classless society. Now, with your blessing in this severely atheistic country, the teachings of Mahaprabhu will be preached. He addresses this to dear uncle Prabhupada Lalit Prasad Thakur. And he mentions a few boys of this place have become very much impressed after listening to our Harinam and want to join us, but the laws of this country are so tough they cannot go against them. That was Prabhupada's first Russian disciple, Ananta Shanti. He met with Prabhupada 3 days. He was initiated on the spot. He gave up his bad habits and he began preaching all around Russia. Later on he was captured. He was tortured for several years in a mental asylum. But the work that he did now has resulted, in the entire Russian yatra developing. He died last year. The devotees have built a small samadhi for him in Vrindavan. Another thing that we found was an unpublished manuscript by Bhaktivinoda Thakur called Harisauri. This is Bhaktivinoda's autobiography, Swalikita Jivani. It's dated there, it's signed by him, and it's dated 16th of February 1895. There's another who stuck his picture in the front and again signed it. And this is back to Binoy Thakur, 250 pages writing about his life. Very, very, incredibly valuable documents. So in reciprocation, although to their credit, they didn't ask for any money from us, they willingly gave the literature to be copied and preserved. So in reciprocation, we gave them 4 lakhs of rupees last year to help build a new prasadam hall. So that's going on, that construction is, this was taken in April, I think, just before I left. So all these old things need to be preserved. We scan, we do lamination, and we do engraving. This Book i4 is a professional library scanner. It costs $27,000. It was imported from Germany. It takes newspaper size documents, and because the scanner's in the top, then you can put old books in this cradle, turn the pages without damaging anything. And this is Ashish, he's our scan man. So the first job that he did was the Nadia Prakash, the daily newspaper. There were 31 volumes this thick, of the daily newspapers. Came to 40,000 images. After they had been scanned, it took 11 months. Then we deacidified all the individual sheets, because if you don't preserve them, then this is what happens. The paper is so brittle, it just breaks off. So we laminate, after deacidifying, then we laminate with this acid-free tissue paper. Now, you can see through it, but it enables us to handle the originals without damaging them. So after laminating everything, then we made a new index for each new volume, and then had them rebound into 60 volumes. So that's just the Nadia Prakash. That gives you an idea of the scale of work that we're involved in. We've got many, many years of this kind of work to do. This is the Gaudiya. That was the next one that we did. These have been scanned. They've also been deacidified, and they're waiting for binding. The other method that we use, or we're trying to, is engraving onto zinc metal plates. You take a digital image, you clean it up, you print it on paper, you make a photographic negative, they put some chemical on the zinc sheet, then they put the negative on top of that and put it in the sunshine. The sun neutralizes the chemical where it shines through the negative, and where it doesn't shine through the negative, the chemical burns into the metal. After a while you wash it off, and you end up with a perfect metallic reproduction of a manuscript showing the original handwriting. So for some, valuable manuscripts, although this is expensive, this is one way of preserving them for many hundreds or thousands of years. Visitors, this is Vinodananda. He is the youngest son at 84 of Sundarananda Vidya Vinod. He's the one that gave his father's collection to us via the Gaudiya mat. We invited him to come. He was very happy to see everything, and he wrote a letter there. They're keeping my father's collection very nice way. I like it very much. He said, now I can go home and sleep peacefully. We've had Pradyumna Prabhu, Prabhupada's Sanskrit editor. I just spoke with him the other day. He lives in New York, but he came and spent a month with us. He's thinking about moving over to Calcutta permanently. That's Das Babaji there, looking at some works. We had 14 scholars from Ukraine came and visited. Rebecca Manring is considered the leading academic authority in North America on the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition. She came and visited. She was extremely happy. Lucian Wong is a PhD candidate from Oxford. He spent 2 months with us. Anthony Foley is another Oxford PhD candidate. And Ruby Sain is a professor of sociology from Jagatpur University in Calcutta. So she's been working with Pranava for about 4 years, to introduce a sociology of religions course. They've never had it in their entire history. This year, after a great deal of effort, the government finally approved it. She just got 1 crore 20 lakhs, which is about $200,000, to begin this sociology of religions course, and Pranava is writing a lot of the curriculum. We have a website, brcindia.com, Bhaktivedanta Research Centre, BRC. Although we're just redoing this, but you can still go online and see we've got a complete catalogue of all of Sundarananda's collection. There's about 2,300 items there. As we scan the contents of each title, they'll be linked up on the computer, so you'll be able to click on any particular title, and then that will bring up all the images associated with that. So eventually we'll have hundreds of thousands of images, just like the 40,000 images from the Nadia Prakash. So that will all be online. We also have a guest house in the same building, so that scholars can come and stay comfortably. That's all mod conveniences, as they say, Wi-Fi, air conditioning, etc. For the future, of course, book acquisition is always going on. We're not just about old books, we're also collecting all new editions that come out. The manuscript mission, whether we get funds from the government or not, that will continue. The scanning and preservation, as you've seen, there's generations of work there. Website construction and maintenance, very important, because we want to make everything available to people around the world. And the translation and publication department has just begun this year. For the far future, or not so far, Prabhupada said he wanted a Mayapur university. So one of the first things for any educational establishment is you've got to have a good library. So we will be the core library for the Mayapur University. We've been told we're going to be given 7 acres of land, and we'll begin like a Vaishnava Theological College there. It will have PhD programs, will be affiliated with the Oxford Centre for Hindu Studies, and tied up with universities like Jaipur. So we have a membership scheme. All of this is done by donation. We don't have any source of income apart from the generosity of the devotees. We have a 4-part membership. The most important one is Adopt a Month. It costs $2,500 US to run per month to keep everything running. So we decided that if we could get a sponsor for each month of the year, up to maybe 15 sponsors, doing a particular month every year, that would take care of all the basic running costs. So right now we've got about 7 or 8 sponsors. We need about another 6 to cover all the whole year. Nitya Sevaks, that's $1 a day or $2 a day. Yearly membership is $501 per annum. And then we have a patron membership, a single donation of $10,000 or above. Bhakti Churu Maharaj, who happened to have been born about a mile away from our building in Calcutta, he was the first one to come forward. Akrura Prabhu from Vancouver was our second. This is Mahesh Advani from Dubai. Mr. Ajahn Tuli is a retired electrician from Melbourne. He gave $10,000 out of his personal retirement fund. And Pratapna and Jayashri run the King's Cross Centre in Sydney. They gave $10,000 towards the purchase of that scanner that you saw. Madhu Savita from Scotland, he's never seen the library, he's never seen the slideshow, but Janananda Maharaj suggested that he make a contribution after his father died. So he got some inheritance and he immediately sent us £16,000. So our aim ultimately is to get an endowment fund. That means you put the principal in the bank, but you never spend it, just the interest. So in India the interest rates are very high, 9.3%. So with 1 crore in the bank, about 200,000, then you'll get about 80,000 rupees a month, which will be enough to cover the essential running costs. So these are our contacts, brcindia.com. We have a PayPal, Lotus Imprints, and that's my Gmail and my Camho account, so harisauri@gmail.com. So if you'd like to put the lights on, yeah, that's the end of the show. So that's it. Srila Prabhupada ki I think you can appreciate this project is something that's going to benefit the whole Vaishnava community for many generations in the future. If we don't protect our literature, then it will just be lost. So Prabhupada was, as you saw in those letters from 1972, he said it was a very, very important work to preserve these items. So we're doing that for the pleasure of Srila Prabhupada. So thank you all very much. Is there any quick questions or comments? I've got my back to everybody there. If anybody's coming through to Mayapur, we have our little guest house there. You can take a detour, add in one extra day for your travel, come into Calcutta, stay at the BRC guest house, and then you can visit this amazing library. When you walk in the library, you're just surrounded by these thousands of transcendental literatures. It's just like being in Vaikuntha. It's an amazing experience to see all this original handwriting of our acharyas. So please do come if you're coming through Calcutta at some point. So I guess that's it. Now it's time for Arati, who's finished just on time. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.